Imagine holding something just dazzling,
Hmm.
so intricately crafted, precious metals, glittering gemstones. It feels like captured history.
Hmm.
Maybe it hides a secret, like a tiny walking peacock or a miniature palace inside. It's not just jewelry. It's luxury and artistry from another world almost.
You're definitely painting a picture of Carl Fabergé's world. Legendary goldsmith, right?
Mhm.
His stuff went way beyond just decoration.
Yeah, exactly. There are art engineering marvels, really key pieces
Mm-hmm.
in the lives of Europe's elite back then.
Mm-mm.
And today, that's where we're diving in. We're going to explore Fabergé himself, look at the genius behind his most famous things, the imperial Easter eggs, obviously,
Of course.
and also check out his surprising connection to London, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, that London branch is quite a story. But we're also going to look at the other side of it all. The tricky business of proving if something is actually a real Fabergé.
Right, the authentication part.
Yeah.
Because with that kind of value and that kind of history.
Exactly. It gets complicated
Right.
and often pretty contentious.
So we've got some great sources lined up. We're looking at insights from a big V&A museum exhibition that had an incredible collection on display.
That was a major one.
Plus an article that really digs into the legal practical challenges for art authenticators and a look at Fabergé's own life story.
So the mission today really is to give you a shortcut to understanding why Fabergé is so significant, his artistry, his legacy, and then use that to explore this whole high-stakes kind of murky world of authentication.
Yeah, like art history meets detective work with a bit of intrigue thrown in.
Pretty much sums it up.
Okay, let's start unpacking this. The story begins with a man himself, Peter Carl Fabergé, Russian goldsmith, jeweler, born St. Petersburg, 1846.
Right. His father, Gustav, actually founded the House of Fabergé. The family had Baltic German and Huguenot roots. So Carl wasn't just taking over a shop, he was inheriting a name, a business he'd completely transformed.
And he really did push it in a new direction when he took over in, 1872.
Yeah.
He wasn't satisfied with just the value of the materials, was he?
No, not at all. There's that famous quote about how expensive things didn't really grab him if the value is merely in so many diamonds or pearls.
Yeah, he wanted more than that.
Precisely. He was focused on the art, the design, the sheer skill involved. He aimed for pieces that were, like he said, more than a sum of their parts.
And people noticed pretty quickly. He won that gold medal at the 1882 Pan-Russian exhibition in Moscow. That sounds like a big deal.
It was huge. And around that time, he was also doing important work at the Hermitage Museum, cataloging, repairing, restoring ancient Greek and Scythian jewelry.
Wow, okay.
So that gave him amazing access to historical designs, and you can really see how that influenced his own style as it developed.
Which then leads us to that really key moment in 1885.
The moment the imperial tradition really kicked off, Carl presented the very first hen egg to Emperor Alexander III. It was an Easter gift for his wife, Empress Maria Feodorovna.
And she just loved it, right? Completely captivated.
Absolutely, so much so that the emperor decided then and there to commission a unique egg every single year. And that commission also came with the title, the very prestigious title, of Supplier to the Imperial Court.
Which gave him even more access to the Hermitage collections for inspiration, presumably.
Exactly, a virtuous cycle, really.
That first hen egg, though, it sounds kind of simple from the outside. Chalky white enamel.
Right, based on an older 18th century design. But the magic was inside.
A gold yolk.
Mm.
And inside that, a little ruby-eyed hen.
Mm-hmm. And originally, inside the hen, there was even more a tiny replica of the imperial crown and a little ruby pendant egg. Sadly, those bits are lost now.
Ah, that's a shame. But the concept, the surprise element, that was the key thing.
Totally. It wasn't just about beauty. It was the wit, the cleverness, the hidden treasure. So the annual commission had only 2 rules. Each egg had to be totally unique, and it had to contain a surprise.
And the emperor sometimes even got involved in the designs.
Yeah, sometimes collaborated. And the tradition didn't stop when Alexander III died. His son, Nicholas II, kept it going. In fact, he upped the order.
Oh, really?
Yep, he commissioned 2 eggs each year. One for his mother, the Dowager Empress Maria, and one for his wife, Empress Alexandra.
Wow, double the Fabergé surprises every Easter. That's quite something.
It was an incredible run. It only stopped with the October Revolution in 1917. The Romanovs fell, their treasures were seized, and the last 2 eggs for that year, well, they were never delivered, never paid for.
Such a dramatic end to it all. But it's these eggs, these imperial eggs, that everyone knows Fabergé for today. Each one a mini masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
And the surprises. Some are just mind-blowing.
They really are. Take the third imperial Easter egg, 1887. That was one of the missing ones for ages.
Right. And the story of how it was found is incredible. A scrap metal dealer bought it, just for its gold weight.
Can you believe it? In 2011, he had no idea what it was. Apparently, you can still see little scratches where he tested the gold. Its surprise was a Vacheron Constantin watch.
Finding that in a scrap pile. It's like a fairy tale.
It really shows how these things have survived through so much turmoil. Or look at the diamond trellis egg from 1892. Its original stand is gone, the one with the silver cupids. But the surprise, this little ivory elephant automaton, it was lost for years, too. Then, in 2015, it was identified, sitting in the British Royal Collection all along.
Wow. Another one with a crazy journey. What about the basket of flowers egg, 1901? That sounds lovely.
It is. Empress Alexandra loved Fabergé's flower studies, so this was perfect for her. A little basket just overflowing with these delicate enameled wildflowers and gold moss. Its base got damaged at some point, so it was re-enameled blue later. And Queen Mary actually bought that one after the Revolution.
Adding another layer to its history. The swan egg from 1906 sounds amazing, too.
No, it's pure elegance. Lilac enamel, which was Empress Maria's favorite color, tied with diamond ribbons. And the surprise, it's this beautiful little swan automaton made of silver-plated gold, based on an old 18th century British one, apparently.
An automaton. Does it move?
Oh, yes. You wind it up, and it glides across this aquamarine pond. It raises its head, spreads its wings, even wiggles its tail like a tiny mechanical ballet.
Okay, the engineering is just as impressive as the gems. Some were huge, though, right? Like the Moscow Kremlin egg.
That's the largest one they made, 1906. It's basically a model of the Ouspensky Cathedral in Moscow. You can look through the windows and see a miniature interior icon's altar.
No way.
Yep. Golden onion dome on top, supported by little Kremlin towers and stairs. And it has a music box inside that plays Nicholas II's favorite hymn. It's like holding a tiny, perfect piece of Moscow.
Incredible. Then there's the cradle with Garland's egg from 1907, celebrating an heir.
Exactly. The birth of Tsarevich Alexei, the son they'd waited for. It's decorated with diamond quivers and Cupid's arrows for love, and these beautiful enameled pink roses for happiness. Its delivery was actually held up by the Russo-Japanese War.
See, they're not just objects, they're tied right into history, into the family's life.
Absolutely, and the technical skill just keeps astounding. The peacock egg from 1908 rock crystal, and inside another automaton. An enameled gold peacock on a little flowering tree.
Inspired by another British piece, right? The James Cox clock.
That's the one. You can wind this little peacock up and it walks and fans its tail. Just remarkable.
Then you have the Alexander Palace egg, also 1908. Much more personal, sounds like.
Very. Celebrating the Tsar and Tsarina's children and their home life, it's made of nephrite jade, and dotted around the shell are these tiny oval portraits of the 5 children. Initials and diamonds, names, and birth dates engraved on the back.
And the surprise.
A perfect miniature model of the Alexander Palace, which was their favorite place to live. So intimate.
The sources also mention a colonnade egg from 1910, a temple of love.
Yeah, described as a towering temple of love, but the details were a bit less complete in what we looked at.
Okay, but we have to talk about Elma Pill, one of Fabergé's key designers, and she did some incredible eggs, the Winder egg from 1913.
Oh, a masterpiece, truly. Inspired by the harsh Russian winter, but making it beautiful.
Wow.
It's rock crystal, engraved to look like frost patterns with platinum and diamonds. The stand looks like melting ice with little diamond streams. And the surprise inside. It's a tiny platinum basket filled with wood anemones made of chrysolite, signaling spring. It's just pure poetry in gems and metal.
Wow. And her other one, the mosaic egg.
1914. Just a stunning display of gem-setting skill. The platinum shell is covered in tiny little cells, each set with gemstones, creating this effect like petite point embroidery. Really intricate.
And the surprise.
Little frame inside holding painted enamel portraits of the 5 imperial children again. And interestingly, it's signed G. Fabergé, a tribute to Karl's father, Gustav.
Nice touch. Finally, there's the Red Cross with triptych egg from 1915, reflecting wartime.
Very much so. World War I was raging. It has the Red Cross emblem and portraits of Empress Alexandra and her 2 oldest daughters, Olga and Tatiana, because they'd actually enrolled as nurses. Yeah. Inside, it opens to reveal Alexandra's symbol, the date, and a painted enamel triptych, the Resurrection, flanked by St. Olga and St. Tatiana. They really do mirror the times, don't they?
Absolutely. But it wasn't just eggs, was it? The House of Fabergé made loads of other things.
Oh, absolutely. The eggs are famous, iconic, but they were just one part of a huge output. Silver tableware, fine jewelry, sure, but also these categories they called objet de luxe and objet de fantaisie.
Oh, explain those terms. Objet de luxe and objet de fantaisie.
Well, objet de luxe would be, really high-end functional items turned into art. Think elaborate desk sets, fancy clock frames, ceremonial pieces, all made from precious stuff.
Got it. Luxurious utility items.
Exactly. And then objet de fantaisie were more whimsical, purely decorative artistic pieces like those amazing hardstone animal carvings, the flower studies, little desk ornaments, often using unusual stones and materials, just for delight, really.
Ah, okay. So beyond just wearable jewelry, they were crafting these luxury decorative art pieces, sometimes playful ones. Makes sense.
Precisely. And the scale of the business was immense. Biggest jewelry firm in Russia, branches in St. Petersburg, where the main workshops were, Moscow for sales, Odessa, Kiev, and, crucially, that one branch outside Russia, in London.
London. Yeah, that feels important. Why London specifically?
Well, think about it. Early 1900s, London was arguably the financial center of the world. Huge hub for luxury goods, attracting a super wealthy international crowd. It was the logical place for Fabergé to set up shop outside Russia, which he did in 1903.
And the British royals were big fans too, weren't they? There were tight connections between the British and Russian royal families.
Very strong links. Edward VII and Queen Alexandra were major patrons, avid collectors. They often exchanged gifts with their Russian relatives, and Fabergé pieces were a popular choice, like a notebook given to Queen Victoria back in 1896.
And Fabergé was clever, right? He adapted his style for the British market.
Definitely. You see pieces specifically commissioned for Sandringham, the king's estate, like those little hard stone figures of the farm animals they bred there, or items using the king's horse racing colors. He knew his clients.
Yeah, the sources mention specific London things, like the little statue of King Edward VII's terrier, Caesar, made from chalcedony.
Yes, and a silver model of his racehorse, Persimmon. And a really rare one, a figurine of a Chelsea pensioner, the veteran soldier.
And that cigarette case from Mrs. Keppel to the king.
Oh, with the snake symbol.
Symbolizing everlasting love, yeah. Quite poignant. Or snuff boxes with London views, like one with Houses of Parliament on it, given to the king by a Russian Grand Duke.
And even grander things, like that rock crystal vase for King George V and Queen Mary's coronation. Fabergé wasn't just for Russians, he became part of British high society.
Deeply embedded. And that whole London connection was the main focus of that V&A exhibition, Fabergé in London. Romance to Revolution.
Right, the one from 2021 to 2022, over 200 objects, tons of imperial eggs, all telling that specific London story. Exactly. The curators said they wanted to explore these sort of timeless themes, love, friendship, ambition through the objects, showing off the artistry, but also really highlighting how important that London branch was. It's often overlooked.
And even after the revolution shut down the business in Russia, the taste for Fabergé didn't just vanish, especially not in London.
No, definitely not. Dealers and auction houses managed to acquire a lot of the pieces that the Soviets confiscated and sold off. Firms like Wartsky, based in London, were really key in buying up eggs and other treasures and selling them on to new collectors.
And now you even have wealthy Russians buying pieces back for repatriation.
That's become a significant trend, too. So the company itself is gone, but the legend, that mystique around the eggs, the demand for anything Fabergé, it's still incredibly strong.
Which brings us right back to that thorny issue, authentication.
Because when you're talking about objects potentially worth tens of millions, the temptation for fakes is huge.
I can only imagine.
And the art market generally is, well, it's a tricky place. It's not really regulated like other big money markets. It's kind of disorganized, which makes it super vulnerable to forgeries.
How vulnerable are we talking?
Some experts throw out really high numbers, maybe 50%, maybe even 70% of works in circulation could be fakes or misattributed. It's hard to say for sure, obviously, because fakes are designed not to be spotted.
50 to 70%. That's staggering.
Yeah.
It makes authentication absolutely crucial.
It really is, because what an authenticator says can literally make or break the value. Think about that Caravaggio example. A painting sells for maybe £40,000 because the auction house thought it was probably a copy.
Yeah.
Then later it gets authenticated as genuine and suddenly it's worth £10 million.
Wow. 40K to 10 million just based on opinion changing.
It shows you the power and the pressure, and forgeries aren't just about ripping off one buyer. They damage the whole market, undermine confidence in genuine art.
So what kinds of fakes are out there? Is it all just deliberate deception?
Well, the sources mention three main categories. First, yes, you have the deliberate fakes, stuff made specifically to fool people into thinking it's the real deal.
Okay, the straightforward bad guys.
Then you have works that were made innocently but get misrepresented later. Maybe a student's copy or a later reproduction, or even something a seller genuinely believes is right but is mistaken about. The creation wasn't fraudulent, but how it sold might be.
Right, intent matters there. And the third?
Genuine pieces that have been messed with, maybe really heavy-handed restoration that changes the character, or later additions to try and make it seem more important or fit a different style.
Okay, so faced with all that, how do authenticators even start? What methods do they use?
Well, traditionally, there are three main pillars. The first is connoisseurship.
That sounds very old school, like an expert just looks and knows.
Sort of, yeah. It's about deep expertise built up over years. Understanding the artist's style, their techniques, the materials they used, developing an eye for it.
But that sounds really subjective.
It is. Highly subjective. A really good forger might be able to mimic the style convincingly. And our understanding of artists evolves too. So relying just on one person's eye, however experienced, it's risky, especially with so much money involved.
Yeah, definitely. So what's pillar number 2?
Provenance.
Right, the ownership history, tracing it back.
Exactly. If you can show a complete documented chain of ownership right back to Fabergé's workshop, that's powerful evidence.
But records get lost.
Or faked.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Provenance is often patchy, incomplete, and documents can be forged too. So even a good provenance isn't absolute proof, and a bad one doesn't automatically mean it's fake. It's rarely enough on its own.
Okay, so subjective eye may be dodgy history, leaving us with science.
Scientific testing is the third pillar. Looking at the actual materials, pigment analysis, metal composition, examining the surface under microscopes. Science can be really good at disproving authenticity.
How so?
Like finding a pigment in a supposedly 17th century painting that wasn't even invented until the 19th century. Boom, fake.
Okay, that makes sense. And it's getting more advanced. People are talking about embedding synthetic DNA in new artworks to track them. But right now, science can't always definitively prove authenticity on its own either. And courts don't always rely on it as the final word.
So ideally, you need all three working together. Connoisseurship, provenance, science.
That's the ideal, yes. But even then, the authenticators themselves face huge challenges. Because the stakes are so high, there's a massive incentive for people to challenge any opinion that says their multi-million-pound Fabergé is actually fake.
Ah, right. Lawsuits.
Exactly. Authenticators live in fear of being sued for negligence or fraud or defamation, even if they gave their honest, expert opinion in good faith.
And defending those lawsuits must cost a fortune.
Astronomical sums. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars. You could win the case and still be financially ruined by the legal fees.
That must just put a chill on the whole field. People must be scared to give opinions.
It absolutely does. Authentication committees and experts are getting much more cautious. Insurance premiums for liability have gone through the roof. Some groups have just shut down entirely.
Like the Andy Warhol Foundation.
That's a famous example. They spent something like $10 million defending lawsuits even though they won, and eventually decided it just wasn't worth it and disbanded their authentication board.
$10 million just to defend your expert opinion, even when you're right. That's crazy.
It creates huge uncertainty in the market. And think about independent experts. They might be brilliant scholars, but they probably don't have deep pockets. They simply can't afford multi-million-dollar insurance policies.
And taking these disputes to court isn't necessarily the answer either.
No, courts aren't really set up for it. The legal standard in civil cases is usually more likely than not, basically 51% certainty. But the art market needs, or wants, a much higher level of confidence than that when millions are involved.
Plus, judges or juries might not understand the nuances, right? They might focus on different things than an art expert would.
Exactly. They might latch onto a signature, while the expert knows the brushwork or the technique is all wrong. And judges, well, they might not have the specialist background to really weigh up conflicting expert views on subtle points of style or material analysis.
And there's no official license or certification for being an art expert, is there?
No, that's another wrinkle. The term expert can be pretty loosely defined in court because there's no standard qualification you have to meet.
I think I read something about attempts to protect authenticators legally. in New York.
Yeah, there has been some movement. Historically, U.S. law, especially in New York, which is a big art market hub, focused more on protecting the buyers. But there's been proposed legislation, like one bill, S-1229A, trying to give authenticators some protection if they offer opinions in good faith, raising the bar for suing them, basically.
Does it try to deal with conflicts of interest, too?
It tries to, yeah, excluding opinions from people who might have a financial stake in the outcome. But even with potential laws like that, the problems don't all go away.
What kind of problems remain?
Well, how do you strictly define an expert for legal purposes? And conflicts of interest are just inherent sometimes. Auction houses, museums, artist foundations, they often authenticate works they also handle or benefit from. It's tricky.
And that idea of the artist's right, the droit moral, has that helped?
It hasn't really taken hold in the U.S., partly because of worries about potential conflicts if, say, an artist's heirs use that right to control the market for their own benefit.
It just sounds like a really complex, expensive mess for everyone involved, win or lose.
That's a pretty fair summary. The incredible value and unique nature of art like Fabergé's makes authentication totally necessary, but also incredibly difficult and fraught with risk.
Wow. So we've gone from the sheer beauty and history of Carl Fabergé's creations, those amazing imperial eggs, the whole London connection.
Right, through to the really challenging high-stakes reality of trying to verify authenticity in today's art market, using his legacy as a prime example.
And it's clear that proving something is genuine. Fabergé isn't simple. It takes this mix of deep history, that expert connoisseur's eye, painstaking provenance research, and now, more and more, complex science.
All happening within this legal framework that's still kind of struggling to keep up with the art world's unique issues.
Fabergé's work amazed stars and kings, and it still absolutely captivates collectors today. But that shadow of the forger and the difficulty of getting a final certain answer on authenticity, it adds a whole other layer to the story.
It certainly does.
So maybe here's a final thought to leave you with. Given how subjective even expert opinions can be, and how legal standards don't quite match what the market wants, and with all that money swirling around, could it be that the ultimate authenticator, the one with the real power, isn't the scholar or the scientist or the judge, but actually the market itself?
What does that say about how we decide what's truly valuable when it comes to treasures like Fabergé's?
That's a fascinating question to ponder. The power of belief and the power of the market. Indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive into the dazzling and complex world of Fabergé. We hope you found it as intriguing as we did.
If you enjoyed exploring this blend of art, history, and authentication, please do consider liking this video, sharing it with fellow enthusiasts, and subscribing to the All Sorts podcast right here on YouTube.
Your support truly helps us continue bringing you these explorations. We've got plenty of other deep dives already available covering a whole range of fascinating topics, so feel free to browse our back catalog.
And don't forget, you can also keep up with the All Sorts podcast on X, Instagram, and Threads for updates and maybe some behind-the-scenes glimpses.
Thanks so much for joining us. Until next time.